Today we are going to start welding on Selena. There she is. That's I don't know if it's a good looking cab. I don't know if it's the way we set up the chassis. Something just good about her. So she is completely prepared. Caleb has prepared her for me to come weld. I got my old trusty Syncrowave 250 analog ready to rip. Got a lot of work room around her. So I don't know where this falls into place as far as an update. But what this will be is just, part of my commitment. I don't know if I have a thorough plan, but I know my general plan is I want to have you guys work with me as much as possible. I was going to say every day, but I don't know if that's completely manageable. But when I'm doing stuff, I want you guys to be there with me. What's it going to look like today? It's going to look like welding this car up. I don't know if that's going to be something where I just get through a couple of the basics, because it could just be really boring time lapse. And especially if I don't have a filter for you, then it's just like this bright light and me moving around all the time welding on this bright light. But what I can tell you is the scope of work. Things that suck for welding a chassis that has been sitting. Anything that's been wiped down with WD-40 or anything even crazier like avocado oil or anything like that, or linseed, super hard to get out. And I'm not as concerned about, say, areas like this as I am areas where it's needing silicone bronze and it's factory sheet metal. That stuff sucks the most. Everybody me wants to do the easy stuff right now. So what I'm probably going to do is set up just to do the trickier stuff, which is going to be the clearanced cab, for the tires there. Reminiscing, that was an early Colin project. I think the first thing he did when Colin tried out is he did the light bar on the Frontier, and then he moved on and did the clearancing and the panel work here for Selena. Why is Selena so torn apart? We'll probably get into that. I don't know if it makes sense right now, but shooting for, a 1500 horse. I said 2000, but I don't know if you can do 2000 without being boosted with turbos, or a blower and, or a lot of money, so 1500 is probably where we're going to end up for horsepower, but that does require something a little different than the stock Toyota engine with a Magnuson supercharger on it. So very well prepared here to just get this up to speed with the welding. There was also some welding in here that got done from one of the previous buyers. They kind of tried to shoot their shot at some of this stuff. I think, well, you know what? Repetition is the father of learning. So they did what they could, but we're going to have to go over this stuff. So part of this is going to be, obviously, like we welded this, and then they welded that. There's a bit of that. They did this whole back wall. So I'm going to just move through it front to rear. I am going to break off and do the hard stuff first, which is going to be that, just because now it's just going to suck. So I'll start there, and then I'll, get some delayed gratification by getting into some of this easier stuff. Probably want to do silicone bronze, different amperage, multiple tungstens, because it's just going to blow the tungstens out. And then we'll move into doing the root passing. A lot of stuff is just tacked. Nice fit up. But, the motor was in here, so we got what we could. We didn't get everything. So this is an opportunity to get this thing completely dialed, freshened up, and cherry. Yeah. Come here. Look it, right here. See? I told you. You're there. Now you're with me. All right off the bat, let's get a light under here. I don't even know if I want this little light. I think I'm actually going to put a big light in. What do we want to do here? See all that grime in there? That's gonna wreak havoc on us. So hardest areas are gonna be the factory sheet metal, right? All that stuff's gonna suck. I think that's gonna want 50 amp setting, maybe even 40 amp setting. And then we'll just pulse control if we want less. Something to think about there. I'm gonna blow it out. I'll wire wheel it. It looks pretty clean as far as wanting to re-DA stuff, but I'm gonna put life into this thing. So it's not just about finishing, it's about bringing it back to life. There's some rust up here, so, you know, end of the story is I'm gonna go through and DA this whole thing. I'll DA it, so sand everything down the best I can. That's kind of sucky. We'll need to figure that out, but I might just leave that pending to what's gonna go on here. It doesn't look final or proper. I know we have a cool cantilever set up here, so we're gonna retain that for sure, so we're boosted. But this stuff, you know, going through, just getting all the stuff that we don't want to get first. And then we'll come back. Easiest stuff is going to be that tube. Tube to sheet metal welding is super streamlined and cherry. Easiest way to do it. But getting through all this is going to be our first measure. So what I'm going to do is get tungsten sharpened up. I am going to get some tools to prep this area. Wire wheel, air line, place to sit, shoot back here. I like to use the red 2% thoriated tungsten. Radioactive, guys. Usually all the best stuff is some kind of cancer or radioactive deal. I don't change tungsten type per welding application. I used to be a real stickler with that, with doing structural stuff with aluminum. Using like in between green and red. We ran purple for a while, but just, I don't know. I just like the red ones. No crazy particular preference for me. A little scatterbrained right now. It's hard to get into a focus mode sometimes. But I know if I force it, I'll get there. So I'm gonna put my stuff down here, a little workbench deal. I'm probably gonna need to grab everything. Like I said, I gotta work into this thing. All right, goods, acetone, reg. Left thick glove. Possible curing protection. A DA sander, barrel sander, Scotch pad, 3-inch. We're gonna use this step as a table. Uh-oh. Okay, tungstens are still safe. All right, something else to look at. These things are really great. So I don't usually use creepers, but with this thing, this is an adjustable back creeper. So it can get you sitting in there. It'll also do an adjustment on the crotch area so you don't submarine. But now I can you know, be right in the focal point of this bad boy. Grab you guys too. All right, clean up on aisle 7. First things first. Ooh, this stuff's grimy. Let's hit an acetone on it too. You know, I'll give them this. They did take care of this thing pretty good as far as rust mitigation. Oh, I remember that little wood block in there. There's this little wood block when we had the cab floating. It's wedged in here. It's lasted this whole time in here.
Still on deep house music right now. I haven't quite got out of it yet. Good luck on that area, brother. Woo. Oh yeah, we're gonna party on this stuff. We're gonna get it, but I don't know how good we're gonna get it. That fresh jar head. Woo! All right, what do we want to do? I'm gonna hit the lower part first just because I need a little trial and error to figure out how nasty this thing is gonna be before sending it into the good spots. Something I wanna try, I'm not gonna have the opportunity to do it right now, but I'd like to try 1/16, or I'm sorry, 045 welding rod instead of just the regular 16th silicone bronze. Probably gonna be a better win when you're doing way smaller beads. Do a little chair swap. So grateful to have these dogs hang out. They are so loyal. I'm such an asshole sometimes where I get frustrated with them. And then I like have to think of them. I'm like, dude, I saw a meme that had to, like the context was something about dogs are our best friends for a certain chunk of our life. And we are their best friends for their entire life. And I just think about that, and that's what they do. They show up for you, and they're so loyal, and they're just there. And it's just only fair that we try to be the best to them. Fucking guy, dude. Get your ground together already. I did abs. Super crazy this morning in the gym. I can feel my stomach is already pretty upset with them. So that's a pretty slow burn. Not that dirty, but it's bubbling. I also don't like being right under the crossfire here. Smoke it, brother. This is what's going to take me in the long run, is breathing all this shit. Good part is, that's not welding too bad, but I can see it's dirty under there. Try to get on top of it. Give it a fighting chance, you know? Nice and close up though, I'll tell you that much. All right, now it's gonna get hairy. So that was overlap style welding. Now this one's gonna be corner weld. Nice fitment, Colin. That makes life easy. See, we need like, if we had glasses on right now for you guys, because I can only imagine that this is going to be boring. So I'm just going to cut it because, like, what are we doing? When I get to that pinch point in about 1 inch, we're going to have some fireworks, sparklers. Right there. See if I can get across this bridge. See, when that rust sets in, that's the stuff that you just can't get away from. Good girl, Selena. Oh, there it is. There's our McNasty. All right, I see what's happening. I'm gonna stay on top of it. Go a little faster. Yeah, it's breaking open. I just dipped it. Oh, dude, it's nasty right there. Come on, dude. I'm gonna have to turn into a grinder, not a welder. So I'm gonna get up, clean this, and then I'm gonna change the amperage a little bit. We're gonna get a win though. It's probably the worst case scenario because everything's gonna drip into there. I'm gonna hit the next worst case scenario, which is all this stuff here. Probably go into that worst case scenario. Just get all the ugly areas done first before doing easy stuff, right? Easy, 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 easy. What do you do with that? This has been all pretty crappy, just trying to get back there. And what I'm gonna have to do is just knock down some of those edges and you get what you get, you know, but that's a crazy spooky layer. So the thing about silicone bronze that you don't get chances to go over silicone bronze, or else it's just very obvious, but it's nothing you should be doing anyways. So it's a one shot, one kill kind of thing. So what happened, I was using this guy. What I noticed with the analog, one of my dreams is to have a welder sponsorship from Lincoln, preferably Miller, but that's been tough. And at some point, if I can have a factory ride for Miller, that would be top tier for what I'm doing right now. Anyways, this thing, something with the amperage, when it goes to, like, you set it at 50, it won't do anymore. It just stays at 50 and it doesn't actually drop to 0. So I brought in the Dynasty because what was happening is I was going to weld all the seams and I was getting pretty bad stuff, and I was settling for that, and then I realized it was just the welder. I wasn't able to blame myself because I got some good stuff. You know, for being years old, this thing welded really good. And then obviously, like, the stuff that hits to the tube work, you know, all came out really consistent and nice. So this side's pretty much done. I got this top hit too. That was a little dirtier going through the seams, but again, not a big deal. I prepped those pretty good in the seams, but I didn't prep like that surface. There's some pretty deep rust on there. But I'm gonna go through there and weld this stuff out too, just while we're on the sheet metal, right? I don't want to change the process or the welder for, you know, having to go back and do all this. So at least all that. At least right now, get all this stuff dialed. I had to do a little fill-in plate over there, but it's almost good as new. So pretty pleased with that. There's WD-40 back on it. I acetoned it and then I put WD-40 on it. This one is prepped. So same thing, I'm gonna hit all the seams, WD-40'd everything, wire wheeled everything, went back, DA'd everything, and then blew it all out. So acetone wipe, and then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna follow all these seams, you know, hit all the shitty spots, and then hit the tube work. This one feels a little more wide open to me, but that should clean up you know, and then obviously get this. I was getting distracted looking at this. This cross member's got a sizable rust situation going on. You know, that needs to be welded. So I'm going to probably go in there and DA as much as I can, and then climb over and get these guys too. So there's some decent gaps in here, but if you treat, you know, for areas like this, you just need to figure out what's going on. You're going to take more heat to get into the tube because it's a thicker material than the sheet metal. So what I will do is I'll build up heat in the tubing in the puddle, and then I'll just really quickly bloop blast over into the sheet metal with it, and I'll carry most of the weight of the puddle on the tubing. Nasty stuff out of the way here. Some of that's just dirty and gapped, but we got decent results for what it is. This area here is not bad. It came out pretty clean for welding factory seams. Pretty good. So then you can see like the cleaner sheet metal grip's different. This is turned up now. Our amperage is up, so I'm gonna start doing this hit here. You know, I connected some of this already around here, but I'm gonna have to continue over here, and then I still have the same kind of process here where it's tubed to sheet metal. I'll just get in as much as I can over here, draw out. Same thing on this guy, get in, draw out. Usually, if I'm doing like chassis welding, I try to keep it all continuous, but some of this I have to favor how the rod works, and that means that I need to just get the cleanest hit I can, and if they have two connecting points, it is what it is. You know, it doesn't need to be stacked. You know, like this is gonna have an end point here, right? And it is what it is. There'll be a bead here, and then instead of continuing on, it just ends here. So it's gonna be okay. You know, it's for what this application is, I would deem that okay. 7 hours. So 7 hours to get all this re-prepped, clean it, fill some miscellaneous holes, get it all welded. Those tubes were probably the hardest thing, just because they were gapped pretty well, more or less on the outside areas like that. They were rusty, you know. So not the end of the world, just, you know, premium. I think the lesson is always to get this stuff, you know, don't let the project where there's sheet metal go too far, where it's sitting, I guess go too long where it's sitting and it doesn't get welded, because you're putting WD-40 on or whatever you need to do to preserve it, and at the end of the day, the silicone bronze is extremely sensitive to contamination. And it just works against you. So we're done with all the what I would call the hard part. I think that it's easy when you weld this kind of stuff, but when you're doing seams on factory recycled sheet metal, it just sucks. So next is going to be going through and really prepping all these areas. I want to get this thing restored back to beautiful. You know, you can see there's a lot of root passing done. There's a little bit of our stuff on here. But what we'll do is just get everything, go through and prep everything we can. Probably going to prep all this stuff. There's a weird plate work thing in here that I don't like, especially over there. So we're gonna fix that. We have the option now. Remember, Selena was originally constructed with the engine in there. We pretty much got everything we needed to. We were not planning on taking the engine out. The real bummer with a lot of these builds, I want to say like these frame rail truck builds, is if you don't take the engine out, you're sacrificing quality and or craftsmanship. You're missing on stuff. You can do an engine cage and get as much as you can, but the bottom line is you're not going to be able to get it perfect. You're not going to be able to prep everything, paint everything. The engine needs to come out to do them properly. And so fortunately with Selena in her best life now, we're putting a different engine in anyways, so we get to come in here and really clean some stuff up. There's obviously some heat barriers that are going to come off, and then depending on what we end up with for this engine, we might have to do some firewall work. It just already kind of looks like that. We're shooting for 1,500 to 2,000 horsepower. We'll see what we get, but right now I'm just going to close down for tonight, start tomorrow fresh, get all the prep work done, all the route passing in, get these things super ready for our final pass, and we'll check in. Selena Welding. Okay. All of our silicone bronze stuff is pretty much done. We just today figured out the powertrain for this thing. So I'm not gonna expel that information right now, but my concerns are regarding welding. These two tubes, it is gonna be a blower motor. It's gonna be a big block and it's gonna be a blower motor. I think right off the bat that we're gonna do a surgical incision on the firewall. Just wondering if these top tubes are gonna pass for what we're doing. Technically they should. The sway bar, so dimensionally, probably gonna want that engine back a little bit, but it's gonna have to clear, all the drive system, dry sump, all the drive system back, and then a big 3.8 liter Whipple on top. With that, remember, we're doing front to rear. So I'm gonna go under here. Overlays, decent. I mean, my welding's gotten better since then. I'm gonna do this little root pass guy. This overlay needs to be done, so I'm gonna re-prep and get that stuff all clean. I'm also gonna get the seam, the weld seam here, and see if I can't finish that out. And then just start prepping this stuff. There's some of this is final, and I don't wanna overextend the amount of work we need to do. Oh gosh, I love that tube. Look at that thing. Nasty. Look at that thing. That's what we were going for, to try to get that, like that whole rip like that. I love this truck. Sean Rubio, also thank you for helping me build this thing. I had good times with you when you were working for me. So, look at the little root pass guy that needs to be done here. Actually in a pretty good spot. Upright is root passed. This stuff is final. Yeah, it feels a little ugly under here. I'm just gonna get one there. Prep all this. So I'm just gonna go through. I'm gonna prep this side right now. Wire wheel, air, safety glasses, DA sander, possible sander, 3-inch sander for our lower section down there. Acetone wipe before we do the DA sander so it doesn't blow out the pad. Let the tool do the work. This is better blended. You a welder, a grinder, brother. It always gets a little weird in the seams. This stuff can get ugly fast. Best thing to do, like there's a couple approaches. You get what you can, grind it out, and then sometimes I'll go in there and I'll just do like a hot root pass, and it'll smoke out all the crap and the grease and whatever's in there, the contaminants. clean it after the root pass and then go back and get the good one on it. Presentation purposes, I like to get the wire wheel on the root pass first, and then I go back and DA sand it. I think this is a coating of something. That root pass looking mighty tricky. But all this stuff cleaned up good. I'm gonna see what this does when I throw a root into it. That's probably the first thing I'm gonna do. I did sand this out here, and that feels pretty clean. Probably gonna leave that. Does have some welding underneath, but I'm gonna stay a pillar forward, close all this out, and then we move into there. Not a ton of stuff. I guess I'll get up here and clean all this too. There is some kind of coating on here that looks a little more than WD-40, which could be, I think it was almond oil that we tried, but man, that stuff stuck. We try to build with the habit of sub-assemblies and brackets for the brackets, meaning the chassis has minimal tabs on it. Like these tabs, right? Those live on the chassis, but they're not the actual bracket that holds the physical components. So then if we wanted to interchange stuff, or say this thing takes a crash, we can just unbolt it here and we're not like damaging back into the chassis where we have to actually cut the weld and everything. We just have a mounting position for what we want in these places. Obviously the sway bar here is its own provision, but you can see the sway bar also has a 2-for-1 where that's a sub-assembly to go out front. So if this thing takes impact or whatever, or you do a design change, you're not tied to the foundation of the chassis. You're just tied to unbolting your piece and making a new piece or whatever, repairing, revising. So especially on like a factory seam like this, just burn the crap out. Some of it's welded. They're all welded like robots and stuff, so it's inconsistently welded. I don't know. It's obvious it sucks, but what you can do is just, if you're doing a double pass on it, then the root just goes in and you just keep your consistent amperage. And as long as you don't blow your tungsten out and you hold the edge, you're gonna get a good foundation for the cover pass. And you're bringing all this crap to the top and you're sealing the deal so that when you come with the cover pass, yeah, see all the crap, your cover pass will remain intact. Consistent amperage. I got the machine set right around 250. Probably a half, 50% input on the throttle or the pedal. And I just have that extra 50% if I have to gas out of something, or get the parent materials to do something. It's a little safety measure. So I know on the last Selena update, we talked about 250 amp cover pass, and someone came on there about like what it says for perimeters for chromoly and all that stuff. You guys have to understand too, when we're doing those cover passes, those are, pedal input, and it doesn't always mean that I'm going full wide open throttle, but I'm definitely not holding it wide open throttle either. So really, you're blipping the full amperage, and it's not giving it that same hit as if you were gonna approach the cover pass with a consistent wide open 250 amps. It's not heating the chromoly like that. So this seam is actually taking really well. Just consistent with amperage, and then I'm just, rod input. The thing that sucks is like areas like this where the tube's already been welded and we're going right to it, because you don't want to interrupt that. But unfortunately, like to tell the story for presentation on welding, I would want to weld all this seam first and then go and stack the tube weld on top of it. And it just wasn't considered for the previous life of this car, but we'll still find a win. So I'm going to chase this down. I'm going to go in here. I'm probably going to be able to chase all this, but first I'm just doing the root. So then I can come in and I'll just DA like and freshen up everything. I'm gonna have to hit all the roots on this stuff too.
That's a little tricky, huh? A little weld positioner on some radius tubing. Give me something to put my hand on.
That'll do, pig. Oh, my hand's not gonna last on that. For me, with the root passing, I look for the parent materials, meaning the two that I'm welding together. You know, with TIG, I look for them to penetrate and to mesh with each other and then apply the rod instead of the rod right on top. So I know that I'm getting the parent materials to bond with themselves first, then adding filler to tie them together once they start to cool down. You know, and I look for that before I just stuff rod on there. So it is hotter, but I know what I'm getting underneath before I just fill it.
Dude, I smash through gum so crazy. I get into it, I bite my tongue, and it's like a problem. It's a character defect. Pretty much dialed on the root passing. At least I started this side, I got both sides. I haven't actually scrubbed on this side, but you can see this side. DA refinish on this, wire, wheel, Scotch-Brite. WD-40 and Scotch-Brite kind of just mellowed everything back out. So what I'll go in now and do is, this is gonna be one of these things, I don't know if this engine mount's even a thing. Part of me is saying to cut it off. I'm sure we'll do a mid plate. I'm gonna leave it for now. I am gonna do this seam in here. I'm gonna close this out. Overlay on this. Definitely tube work, plate work, bracket, come inside. You know, some of this stuff is just a root too. So just get it cleaned up. I'm not looking to spend a ton of time on this. I'm looking to priority finish it so we don't have to go back to it, especially when you start adding a bunch of parts and components. Just one more thing to do in the end. And I learned that with a lot of these things is the more you save to the end, like, oh, we'll get it later. Oh, we'll Cleco this. Oh, we'll leave this. It turns into 300 little things that you have to do in the end. And if I can nip some of them while we're going through the build process, I'd rather do that. So same thing. I want to get all of the main structural stuff welded. The other thing that happens is once you start adding more layers to the structural stuff, even just for instance, if you wanted to have a panel here, you may have a Zeus button that goes right here. And if you have that Zeus button, then you're blocking this area where if that's poking out here, you can't actually get in here, or it's not a consistent nice weld. So, there's things like that. They can be anywhere, and I don't want to stress that. So I want to just get the premium result here before we move forward. Some different stuff here. So I started to weld. It's a little dark over here, but what we'll do is, I miss my fluorescent lights. I'm grateful for these lights, but I miss the fluorescent lights. So I started to weld this stuff. Just got a little greasy finger action on it. I'll put light on here because I know it's hard to see. One thing I had Caleb do, I know for sure with our engine package, we're gonna be running, I probably mentioned it already, but we're gonna be running a Nelson big block with a large Whipple blower on top. So I know we don't need the motor mounts that were sitting here. So I had Caleb shave these off. Something ugly is this ravine. Let me see. So this is pretty cleaned up over here. What I can do is run, over. So let's talk about the ugly side. This is the ugly side where, there's like an overlay or something here. Super nasty. It's also a lot higher than what we want. So I'm gonna sand this down and I'm gonna run a plate that's gonna grab this and it's gonna actually fasten it to the chassis where I can have it come over here. Let's draw this thing. Have something come over here. Maybe it'll rip over here. And it'll cut right before the weld seam. Go right up to the tube. You know, and maybe even cut back here. Just something that cleans this up. Where I can sand this. It's already welded down into there, but it's like to clean this up, it's ugly. We can just literally flatten some of this out, put an overlay on here that grabs it, and then I'll probably match an overlay on that side just so it's there. And that'll also secure the cross member. So it's not just butt welded onto there, but it's got an overlap joint. So I'm gonna work on getting a template for these right now. I just, you know, like I said, I started welding on this thing, but right now, since those are gone, I'd rather get the fab in. And then Colin went through and he route passed everything. So he chased whatever I didn't get. So we're pretty much ready to final pass everything here. I just want to get a little bit of fab done. The other thing that's definitely going to happen, I think I said it might, but this needs a mid plate. You can see there's tubes. This big prominent one for the A-pillar that's going all the way up to the A-pillar here. That's a really good spot on this side to come up and join the windshield tube. And then and that might have to have a bend like this, but that's going to be the mid plate mount for the big block. I bet you the big block's going to be this. Incisions and cut through here. I don't want to have to delete the whole firewall. I want to try to keep this minimalist and stuff like that, because we already have a good carcass going where we don't need to just keep removing. Everything's solid. It's probably good enough. I'm not going to fully prep this yet. I'll just do my templates. Make sure I get something. I ground this off. I should just be able to rip this, clean this up, continue the corner. I'll probably start from this corner. It won't be a continuous bead, but that'll be a good start path right there. And I'll rip this way. And then we'll just get that overlay that cleans this all up. That should get us back on track. Since this side has one, it makes sense to have it on that side too. There's not as much collateral damage on the seam where these two connected on this side. So this will just be a pretty traditional, easy, you know, template to get going. I'll put a little design into there. As far as I know, I don't think this has a front plate on it, but it should. So we'll need to figure out with Tom Nelson what we're gonna do as far as what that's gonna look like, because I don't know. I don't prefer mounting off the block anytime. The ID Designs front plates that we use, those already have a decent front plate, you know, where we mount from. So I gotta turn the music down. So I cut this a little early. You can see what's going on here. You know, I'm using this as my parallel for the main.
and then the seam is going to be the next one, but I cut it too early, so I'm not covering those holes, which would just be a really easy win to scoot it another 1/4 inch out this way. So we're gonna do that. I don't think it requires too much brake, but we do need to have a guy down here getting pressed down. So that'll do this side. I'm gonna get something matching over on that side. When I was a little kid, I'd see those RC magazines. So 90s, I was a 90s kid. I was born in 85. When I was a little kid, I used to look at the RC like plane magazines. I remember the one prominent thing was Tower Hobbies. There was a badass, like, the prominent like store things were catalogs. You had like Dan's Competition, CCS for skateboarding, and then you had Tower Hobbies for the RC stuff. That's a tangent I could go on, but what I used to see is planes, the construction of planes, and they used to make them out of like balsa wood, and then like they'd skin them. And so what I'd do, I was too young to do any of that, so I used to build stuff out of paper, scissors, Scotch tape, like complete jets with clear plastic tape fuselages. You know, and I did it like as a kid, and I'd just go through like rolls. My mom had a little tape dispenser, and I would go through rolls and rolls and rolls and just cut tape, you know, cut things, tape them, and build shapes out of the paper and bond it all with clear tape, Scotch tape. Sometimes I wonder, like with template making, if that's been part of my story, where like now I'm just literally just doing the same shit as I was when I was a kid, except on a different scale. As far as what I was talking about with Tower Hobbies, I had this opportunity when I was younger. My stepfather and my mom, they planned this trip, and the trip was to go to the East Coast and tour the East Coast. And I knew we were going to New York City, and they, you know, we did everything. Went to the Statue of Liberty and went up in the World Trade Center and had brunch up there and all the shit. And I knew that Tower Hobbies was in New York, and I wanted to visit Tower Hobbies out of anything. Tower Hobbies. We took a cab there. There was no Ubers or anything. No cell phones. And Tower Hobbies was this little place on a side street in downtown New York. Little, like you walk up a metal like rung stair set outside of a brick building, and I went in there, and it was just a tight little space with a counter, and they were completely built off online sales. There was no big showroom like I was anticipating, but I still went there. That was like my goal, but man, it's not what I was expecting. Some of these shapes are so basic that I want to keep what Selena represents in this era of when we built her. So I don't want to add too much, design language into something that's already like in a different era of our design, because that's what this is. This was it was a little more constrained, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But some of our design stuff now, I go through these natural curves of my own progression. Part of my, sounds like a fighter jet. So the style was just more simple and geometric from what it is now. A lot more organic now.
trim this a little bit, but I know I trimmed it too short on the other side, so I'm just gonna leave it. I got enough here to cut these out. These are quick and dirty. If it's anything complex, you know, or where we'd want to get style points, I'd do like a, you know, an interior cutout this thing. But for what this is, it's just an additional structural piece buried by the engine. Get the wins where you can. If it was out here or something and we wanted overlays, you know, with cutouts in the middle, cool. But again, keeping the vibe right is not adding a tremendous amount. There was just a lot of raw plate work here, not a lot of pockets and openings. So we're going to be respectful to Selena and her design already. I always like to put a nice bevel on the edges. It's a good measure for welding. It's also a good measure for handling. Not having them be sharp. And then the final measure for you is for powder coat and paint. If you have a really sharp corner, the paint and the powder coat has more of a likelihood of chipping from contact on that corner. So if you make a subtle transition, which is essentially a bevel, which bevel would be, you know, like a 45-degree edge, transitioning the 90-degree corner and splitting the difference. And that lets the paint or the coating have a way to fall over on the other side, where it, you know, a wrench tap or something doesn't make things chip off as easy. Or anything else. I mean, I think wrench tap just for assembly, but you know, the car being used and whatever elements that part would face. One thing I'm going to do here with these parts is I'm not going to put a brake in them yet, even though I have that on my notes on the template. I don't trust that. I want to fit it, and I want to. It's going to be a pretty obvious brake on where this stuff goes. So I'm just going to get these things fit and then mark on here, because my template could be a little delusional just from what's going on here. You want to watch this parallel? I'm going to respect this parallel. I'm going to put the brake in here. And then if I need to trim on the side, because I see a consistency here that's not the same over here where this tightens, just because this factory weld area is far from consistent or parallel. Then that tail over there is going to need to do something different. So same kind of deal. This thing just wants to fold over. Very simple part, single plane brake, easy to do. Just burp, blast that over. Once we get it over, then I'm gonna do another trim on this thing. Got a little trim on the radius here. Got a little trim back there. Pretty good on both these. I'm gonna trim them, clamp them, tack them. Final DA once I get, you know, even the root pass done. Ratchet? It's root passed. So one of the things that at least I try to spare myself doing is run in the plates, DA sanding the plates before they even get root passed. You really just don't need to. The last finish you want for that plate is going to be the dual action orbital sand. So I can tack everything on here, I can root pass everything, and then I go back and I'll wire wheel this whole perimeter where the weld is, and then I'll get our top sitting on it. I started to clean this up just because it's rusty and ugly, but there's definitely some stuff to get to here. You know, missing spots. I'm at a point here, I believe, with current fabrication where it's just going to be time to final pass everything. All the root passing is done. So I'm going to go through and just start working the areas. Something's telling me to start here. So I'm going to start here and just work through. I'll find the discomfort, you know, all consistently. So you can see like this. Some gusseting and some unprepped root pass. It's pretty freaking ugly in there. So I'm going to treat some of these concentrated areas, you know, at once. I'm not going to jump around. I'm just going to start in a flow and just move through. Let's go over a couple things on this really quick. So Luke has gone through, assembled all this stuff on, you know, looking on his computer at the file. Everything is prepped. So the root passing is complete. Something else to look at here is these cutoff wheel marks. So a trick that I do, and when you're doing stuff that's not like a direct corner weld or an outside corner weld, but it's like almost flat planes or just very minimal angle, like directional changes, is I go and I have it scribed. So when I flip that hood, I can still see there's a leading edge of a highlight of a channel, you know, because the welding light, essentially from the torch, the arc lights that up for me. And, you know, I don't do some kind of drunk driver line trying to stay in the center of where that is. So there is that stuff on specific areas that need it. And then everything else we're going to be able to get. Well, it's a pretty extensive amount of welding here. I don't know. I'm probably going to start doing some of the problem areas first. Little detail areas. I want to try to find uniform consistency here, where we're running like rips, where we're not like butting into each other. You know, the bead is all the same orientation. So I'm going to figure out, you know, the first layer of where the details are, you know, and then there'll be a main perimeter that's going to go. I want to, you know, show the construction of the cross member via how the weld is performed for the root pass or for the final pass. Couple things here. When you order stuff like machined or material to machine, this was under the McMaster of, and this was a way back. I wouldn't do this anymore, but it was easy to machine 4130, and it's really soft. So it doesn't. Something about it being soft, it doesn't render the same welding quality. I still kind of got it, but it's just not, it didn't make life easy. So I went through, welded everything that needed to be. I can't tell if this is focused or not. Added overlay plates into here. You know, there was a lot. So like all the sway bar wasn't welded yet. Asymmetrical gusset, pretty cool looking thing. Overlays. But yeah, what I did is I took well, Caleb demoed the mounts off here, and then this was just kind of butted up to the frame, so we added like a nice capture of an overlay. And this gives us nice foundational area to put whatever we need to here. I think some of this was done for sure. So this wasn't as bad because nobody had gone through and welded any of this. It was just kind of the only issue you get into when you're doing stuff on a car that's been, it's either changed hands or it's been sitting in the elements for a while, is gets debris, it gets rust, and then, you know, these guys were taking care of this thing, so there was layers of WD-40, and you can only get so much of that out of the actual like cracks in the fitment in the fabrication, especially when it's already tacked. It's almost better to just have it root passed and you can clean it better than when it like actually seeps into the tacked areas. So the rear was more challenging because this was
at least from like this portion forward, was all welded. So it's been a thing of going through and re-welding. I looked at stuff, and it wasn't to the size where I couldn't. My welds are usually pretty wide, and I got, I still got a win. I don't know how to get the lighting good on this. It's like too direct of lighting. Maybe a little dim. So went through here, re-welded everything. The silicone bronze stuff, you don't really get a second chance at that. So that was what it is. Got everything else pretty good. Still got this guy to go. A little rough, but all the back wall. So, a little bit of everything in here. Came out pretty good. And this is all fresh stuff. This was just tacked. So we got kind of a better win on this stuff. I feel like my lighting sucks. Bump stop mounts are done. I popped the down tubes off here so we could get welds up in here. Something to also note is the down tubes. I think since we're going to run a big radiator like this, fans on the bottom side pulling in from a roof scoop, we're going to have more structure. It's going to be kind of ugly structure. We'll do it as tasteful as we can. But instead of the down tube popping from here down to there, I think it's going to have to go out a bit and then drop down and be supported. So then that cooler has protection if there, worst case scenario, it crashes or there's a roll and you still have the chance to drive it. You roll it back over and you don't compromise your radiator. Get under here. And then I'm going to get in with you guys on what I'm doing currently. I'm juggling projects here, so a lot of this is like after hours. These are probably some of the worst areas on the car as far as them being dirty. Look at this. That was one of the worst holes right there. This thing, there was a huge vent hole drilled right here and water lit. I think this whole tube was essentially full of water. And I couldn't get, even finishing this thing out, I still couldn't get that thing to stop puking water. And it got pretty bad where it pissed rust water over and over. Inside of this guy. Okay, so something to look at here. When we had, there's a reason for all these tubes. If you go back on the Selena updates and you look, when we were doing the frame, there's a spread going on where instead of landing to one junction, I wanted to land to a different couple key areas in the frame where it spread the strength in the frame, because we weren't doing a round tube test, we were doing this, stock factory frame rail. So, I figured the best way to keep strength in here is to land to a couple different spots. And the thing is with these tubes that go in here, like just this tube for instance, right? And this is all older work. This was done, years ago by us. This tube doesn't end here. You can see where we've plated all the frame. So this tube actually goes all the way in and lands to the other side, you know, the outside frame rail, and then we weld it there, and then we plate the frame, and then we weld it again. So it's like walled, you know, it's like an internal gusset or a rib. One of the things here that, you know, this is current stuff, is none of these plates were here. So these tubes dive down and they land on the top of the frame rail just like this. This guy lands there, this guy lands there, and then they're welded. So the side plates here, these were done, but there was no top caps. So, you know, everything got in there welded, and then we had to close all this out. So that's what I've added in here, is these closeout plates, where it's all done. And then it's also like some of the welding that really sucks is in these areas, because it's fully rusty. So I got it as good as I could. But that's like, this is right where I've left off right now, is getting all this done. And then, you know, drawing out our corner weld here. All the front's already done. I kind of try to get to the worst spots first. Same over here. So that's the last of this bit. What I needed to do is I needed to get this prepped, so when, you know, Luke comes over here to do the seat mounts, or any other miscellaneous fabrication, the actual welding is completed, and it's not, you know, we're not digging ourselves into or burying ourselves with work on top of welding that needed to be done. So then we can still try to get the most optimal weld we can, going over some of this stuff without more structure, plate work, tube work being tied into this thing. So I'm almost done here, and then we can look under here. There's still frame welding to do. So big overlays, you know, that span out from the doubler here. This is all chromoly, but see like how nasty it is. There's gnarly grime and stuff in there. So, you know, it's tacked very tidy and properly, but I'll have to go through here. And what I'm hoping is that I get a root pass, and that root pass brings all the impurities out. And then, you know, I can clean the whole thing in its entirety with the root pass, you know, consistent. And then I can get a nice good chance to do the final weld. You can see some of the root passing was done on this thing. I wouldn't say it's premium, but, you know, I'll be able to go and clean this up, re-DA everything. Well, what I'll do first is I'll wire wheel everything so I can get the actual crevice of the weld, and then I'll come in and I'll DA everything. But you can see, like, I remember these times of building this because we had integration here where we wanted the radius arm mount to be pocketed into the frame. The frame is so wide on these Toyota trucks. Look, I mean, it's, you know, it's not even a full hand to the rocker from the, you know, the door seam to the frame. It's already, like, it's so wide that it plays a huge part in just being able to put mounts right off the side of this thing and not hang them down and out like a normal truck. So all this is built into it. And then we're gonna have a billet radius arm that's gonna play right here. So I just wanted to give you guys more of an in-depth on this thing, because I think it'll be, I'm gonna give Joey a chance right now to rip B-roll of all the welds and see what we get. Dude, I got this rotor. See this thing? That sucks. I think we got everything in a good spot. What to expect next with this thing: rear seat mounts, rear configuration. Let's rip a Fab Diaries on doing the roof scoop rendering for Pilgrim. I'm gonna, you know, this is gonna be one of these things, or this is gonna get a little uncomfortable looking when it's bare bones skeletal structure before we put all the tin work on here and close this thing out. The whole principle on the rear of this now is housing fuel, cooling, and that's it. You know, I think the dry sump tank is gonna have to live back here after the sway bar, because the sway bar arm is gonna travel right here, and then the dry sump tank is gonna have to be here. Whoa. And you know, then that big cooler. The whole point of this thing is to be able to cool the engine package that we're getting. And this truck is going to turn into the sum of its engine. It's going to be such a dynamic powertrain that we're going to have to just build this truck around what the motor is going to want from the chassis. So I think that's it for this thing. I hope I got good shots of this stuff. It's hard to know, but it is what it is. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy this one. I know it's a little different. Enjoy the B-roll.